It was a quiet afternoon outside Steven Seagal's famous restaurant. Fans strolled past, snapping photos, while others waited to meet the martial arts legend. Seagal himself was relaxed, greeting familiar faces with a small nod and a calm smile. The sun glinted off the windows, and for a moment, everything seemed perfectly normal like any ordinary day. Steven walked toward the entrance, his hands in his pockets, taking in the crowd. His body language was casual, almost serene, but there was an unmistakable aura of confidence that made people stop and stare. He had faced some of the toughest fighters in the world, yet today, there was no ring, no camera crew, no scripted fight, just him and the world outside his restaurant. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a stranger pushed through the crowd. In a split second, the unexpected happened. The man slapped Steven Seagal across the face. Gasps erupted. Phones were lifted to record the moment. People froze, unsure of what to do. The slap seemed impossible, a bold, shocking act against a man known for his martial arts mastery. Seagal blinked, momentarily stunned. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, tension spreading like wildfire. Who was this man? Why would anyone dare to disrespect a legend like Seagal in public? People whispered, some stepping back, some leaning forward to get a closer look. The stranger didn't stop there. He smirked, clearly trying to provoke a reaction. But Steven Seagal did something no one expected. Instead of striking back, lashing out, or shouting, he stayed perfectly calm. His expression was unreadable, almost serene. He glanced at the man, then at the crowd, taking a slow, steady breath. There was a quiet strength in his posture, a subtle warning that he wasn't a man to be underestimated, but also a signal that he wouldn't let a single slap control him. In that moment, everyone watching felt it. Something big was about to happen. The tension was electric, thick enough to cut with a knife. People whispered to each other, their curiosity building. What will he do next? Will he fight or walk away? Little did anyone know, this slap wasn't just a random act. It was the spark that would ignite a chain of events no one saw coming. Events that would change everything for Steven Seagal in ways the crowd couldn't imagine. And as the stranger laughed, confident he had stunned a legend, he had no idea that minutes later, his actions would set off a shockwave that nobody could forget. What Steven did next stunned everyone, even those who thought they knew him. The slap echoed in the quiet afternoon, leaving the crowd stunned. Phones whipped up to record every second. Some people gasped audibly, others froze, unsure whether to intervene or just watch. The stranger stood there, smirking, seemingly proud of himself. But Steven Seagal, he didn't flinch. Not even a fraction. His calm, almost unreadable gaze swept over the crowd, then fixed on the man who dared strike him. The tension was immediate. Conversations stopped mid-word. The air felt thick, electric, as if everyone could sense the weight of the moment. A few brave bystanders whispered to each other, questioning the stranger's audacity. Who even does that? This is Steven Seagal. As the minutes passed, Steven took a slow step toward the entrance, still composed, still unshaken. The stranger tried to provoke him further, speaking under his breath, taunting him with words meant to trigger anger. But Seagal remained silent. Every movement was deliberate, controlled. The crowd could see it, the aura of a man who had faced far greater danger than a single slap, and yet he wasn't losing control now. Whispers and murmurs spread like wildfire. "Where are you from?" one bystander asked someone filming. "This is insane," another added. "I can't believe this is happening outside his restaurant." Steven's eyes flicked toward the crowd. He noticed something almost imperceptible. People were starting to pull out their phones, not just recording, but sharing. The story was going viral before anyone even realized it. The energy was chaotic, half fear, half curiosity. Every single person was silently asking, what will he do next? And that's when the engagement began. People in the crowd, scattered across the city and even outside it through live streams, couldn't contain themselves. The story became bigger than just the slap. It was about confrontation, tension, and the aura of a legend. Seagal didn't speak yet, but his presence alone demanded attention. At this moment, it was important to check in with the viewers. Before we go any further, I want to know something. Where are you watching this from? Which country or city? Drop it in the comments below. I'm reading all of them. The stranger, seeing the growing attention, became bolder. He stepped closer, leaning into Seagal's personal space. Some people in the crowd whispered, warning him to stop. Others, wide-eyed, just recorded silently. But Seagal's composure didn't waver. He didn't raise a hand. He didn't yell. Every movement was calculated, every breath steady. It was obvious to everyone watching. The world was holding its breath. Even the passerby tourists stopped to stare. This wasn't just a slap, it was a test. And Steven Seagal, in that instant, was already teaching a lesson. He was proving something more powerful than violence: self-control, mental strength, and the aura of a man who doesn't let someone else's foolishness dictate his actions. People across multiple countries started sharing the videos. Comments popped up online in real time. "I'm watching from New York, this is insane. London checking in, he's not reacting. Manila here. He's calm but terrifying." The tension grew heavier with every passing second. The stranger's confidence faltered slightly as he noticed the attention, the murmurs, the growing awareness that he might have underestimated the man he slapped. And yet, he lingered, not ready to back down. Steven Seagal's calm was a trap, mental, emotional, and impossible to ignore. The crowd was completely captivated, mentally and emotionally hooked. They couldn't look away. And just like that, the stage was set. The slap was no longer the story. It was the beginning of a chain of events that would shock everyone, change the atmosphere, and eventually leave the stranger facing consequences he never imagined. The world was watching, and Seagal was just getting started. The slap had already sent shockwaves through the crowd. But the situation was far from over. Minutes after the incident, the stranger began to escalate. He wasn't satisfied with just the bold, shocking slap. He wanted a reaction. Leaning closer to Steven Seagal, he muttered words meant to provoke, insults delivered with a smirk, as if daring the martial arts legend to lose control. The crowd tensed immediately. Some people whispered warnings, while others instinctively raised their phones higher, capturing every second. Some fans held their children back, sensing the growing risk. The stranger, oblivious to the danger of his audacity, continued taunting. His gestures exaggerated, his smirk growing cocky. But Steven Seagal didn't react the way anyone expected. He remained calm, almost eerily composed. His eyes locked on the stranger, a subtle intensity simmering just beneath the surface. Every breath was measured, every movement deliberate. The calmness wasn't weakness, it was strategy, and the crowd could feel it. Whispers circulated instantly among bystanders. "He's not even moving. He's not scared. Is this part of a stunt? Who even slaps a legend like him and thinks they're safe?" The tension rose like a storm ready to break. The stranger, sensing the eyes of the crowd and the recording phones, tried to assert dominance, poking at Steven with words and gestures. But each time he stepped forward, Steven's quiet presence was enough to hold him in check. People started leaning closer, captivated by the battle of wills unfolding in front of them. Then came the first real emotional hook for the viewers. Some in the crowd were visibly nervous. "Someone should do something," they whispered. Others were torn. Part of them wanted to intervene. Part of them wanted to watch history unfold. Children clung to parents. People held each other's hands, and every phone was recording, capturing the suspense, capturing the fear, capturing the awe, and that's when the mental trap kicked in. The crowd, online viewers, and YouTube audience all shared the same question. If this happened in front of me, what would I do? Would I intervene? Would I stay frozen? If this happened in front of you, what would you do? Comment your reaction below. Don't scroll past this moment. Back on the street, the stranger's confidence began to waver, ever so slightly. The crowd's gaze wasn't just focused on Steven anymore, it was a collective pressure. A silent force that made him realize he might have underestimated the man he had just slapped. And while he hadn't physically harmed anyone else yet, his boldness was starting to feel reckless. Steven's calm demeanor was like a magnet. Every eye in the crowd was fixed on him, every mind caught in the tension of the moment. His presence was mentally trapping the audience. Everyone wanted to see what he would do. Yet they were also captivated by the way he didn't act. The silence itself was powerful. The controlled energy radiating from him created suspense so thick, it was almost suffocating. The stranger tried one last verbal jab, stepping forward with a hand raised, as if to intimidate. But Steven simply stepped aside slightly, letting the man's arrogance hang in the air for everyone to see. The crowd collectively held its breath, sensing that this was the turning point, the moment when either chaos would erupt or Seagal would assert control in a way no one could have anticipated. And that's the genius of the escalation. The stranger had meant to provoke fear, to humiliate, to shock. But Steven's restraint, calm, and composed energy turned the situation upside down. The mental tension gripped the audience, both in the crowd and watching online. Every person watching was now trapped emotionally, wondering not just what would happen next, but how the legend would respond. Minutes passed like hours. The crowd, silent but emotionally charged, leaned in. Phones were recording history in real time. And somewhere deep inside, everyone watching felt the same thought. This is bigger than a slap. This is a lesson in power, control, and respect. The stage was set. The stranger had lit the fuse, but the explosion, the moment everyone would remember, hadn't happened yet. It was coming, and no one in that crowd would ever forget it. The crowd's tension had reached a peak. Every eye was locked on Steven Seagal and the stranger who had dared to slap him just moments before. Phones were recording from every angle, capturing each second of the drama. The air was thick, charged with fear, anticipation, and curiosity. People whispered among themselves, their words barely audible over the collective heartbeat of the crowd. Then something unexpected happened. A bystander, a young fan who had been observing from the side, suddenly gasped. His voice trembled as he shouted, "Wait, that's Steven Seagal." The words spread like wildfire. Murmurs erupted into whispers, whispers into excited chatter. That's him, the real Steven Seagal, the martial arts legend, the actor, the man who's faced countless fighters in movies and in real life. The crowd's energy shifted immediately. Where there had been tension and fear, there was now awe and disbelief. Phones started zooming in, everyone wanting to capture the moment of realization. The stranger, however, seemed completely unaware at first. His smirk remained, his arrogance unchecked. He didn't recognize the full weight of the man standing in front of him, but the crowd did. And the crowd was no longer just spectators, they were witnesses to an unfolding legend. People started whispering among themselves, sharing stories of Steven's past, his career, his legendary fights, and his calm yet intimidating persona. Everyone could feel the gravity of the moment. A slap that had seemed audacious seconds ago now felt reckless in the presence of a living legend. Steven Seagal, meanwhile, stayed calm as ever. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't boast about his identity. He simply stood there, letting the energy of the crowd, the tension, and the stranger's misplaced confidence build to a point where the world seemed to pause for him. There was a quiet power in his stance, a controlled energy that made the entire scene feel like a storm held in check by sheer will. The stranger started noticing the change in the atmosphere. Whispers turned to outright gasps. People stepped back slightly, keeping their distance. His confidence wavered as he realized the crowd wasn't just recording, they were reacting, judging, and shifting their attention. The stranger's arrogance was fading in real time, and Steven's calm was the silent hammer reshaping the moment. Here's where the psychological tension hooks viewers. The crowd had recognized the legend, but the stranger had no idea what he had unleashed. Every glance Steven threw was measured, precise, and full of quiet authority. People watching online and in the crowd began to feel a mix of fear, admiration, and suspense. They were mentally trapped, caught between wondering if Steven would strike, speak, or simply let the situation unfold. Some in the crowd shouted quietly to the stranger, "Do you know who you're messing with?" Others recorded, narrating into their phones, adding to the drama for viewers far beyond the restaurant. The moment had evolved from a slap into a mental chess match, and every person present was now emotionally invested. Meanwhile, Steven's calm demeanor sent a message, stronger than any punch or yell could. Control is power. Restraint is intimidation. The crowd could feel the tension radiating from him, and it was mesmerizing. Every person in that moment, whether in the crowd or watching online, was mentally hooked, emotionally invested, and desperate to see what would happen next. The stranger, sensing the shift but still not fully aware of Steven's identity, tried to regain control. He gestured, attempting another taunt, but it fell flat. The whispers grew louder. "That's Steven Seagal. He's not going to let this slide." The crowd's energy now aligned against him. Every action he took was being judged, dissected, and amplified in real time. In that instant, it became clear to everyone watching. This wasn't just a random slap outside a restaurant. This was a test of composure, a battle of wits, and a moment that would define both men's reputations. And while the stranger had thought he controlled the situation, the reality was clear. He had walked straight into the eye of a storm, and the world was watching, waiting for the outcome. The legend wasn't moving yet, but he didn't have to. The crowd, the energy, the mental tension, they all did the work for him. And in moments like this, silence can be louder than any shout. The air outside the restaurant had grown heavy with anticipation. Every eye in the crowd was fixed on Steven Seagal, and every phone was recording history. The stranger, who had once smirked confidently after the slap, was now visibly uneasy. The whispers of, "That's Steven Seagal," had spread through the crowd, but he still seemed unaware of the full weight of the situation. He tried to regain control with a wave of his hand, a jab of words, but the effect was minimal. The crowd's energy had shifted. They weren't afraid anymore. They were waiting, watching, and judging. Steven's gaze locked onto the stranger, calm, measured, unshakable. There was no rage, no snap reaction, just a quiet, intense presence that made the seconds stretch longer than anyone thought possible. The crowd could feel it, a power far stronger than violence alone. Every movement he made was deliberate, every gesture loaded with a subtle authority that demanded attention. Finally, Steven spoke. Not loudly, not aggressively, but with a tone that immediately silenced the murmurs and drew the attention of every person around. "Enough," he said. His voice was calm, steady, and precise. "You have no right to attack someone without reason. You have no right to humiliate anyone in public. Not me, not anyone." The stranger froze. The words were simple, but their effect was profound. The crowd leaned in, their own heartbeat accelerating as they absorbed every word. It wasn't the words themselves that shocked them, it was the combination of calm authority, mental dominance, and moral weight behind them. Steven took a slow, deliberate step forward. "Violence is not strength," he continued. "Control is strength, respect is strength, and arrogance, when it crosses the line, always falls." The stranger's face turned pale. The crowd now murmured audibly, sensing the shift in power. What had started as a bold act of aggression was now crumbling under Steven's quiet mastery of presence and authority. People who had been filming began narrating, speaking in awe, their words amplified online. Every second added pressure, every whisper building tension like a tightrope ready to snap. At this point, the psychological effect was total. Everyone watching, whether live or online, was mentally trapped in the moment. They weren't just witnessing a confrontation, they were experiencing it. They felt the tension, the fear, the awe. They were asking themselves, "If I were in the stranger's place, could I even stand?" Steven paused, letting the silence sink in. The stranger tried to speak, but his voice faltered. Words that had seemed sharp moments ago were now meaningless. The crowd, sensing the stranger's faltering confidence, grew bolder. Some began shouting softly in support of Seagal. Others whispered in disbelief. The momentum had completely shifted. The brilliance of this moment lay in restraint. Steven didn't strike, he didn't yell, and he didn't humiliate. Instead, his words carried the weight of experience and integrity. The crowd's collective mental and emotional focus was now entirely on him. Every person there, and every person watching online, felt the gravity of the moment. For a few seconds, time seemed to slow. The stranger's arrogance evaporated as he realized he had miscalculated completely. He had thought he could provoke a legend, but instead, he had stepped into a quiet storm, a force far stronger than anything he had imagined. By the end of this exchange, the audience was completely hooked, emotionally invested, and mentally trapped. The tension had reached its peak, and everyone, crowd and viewers alike, knew one thing. The climax of this confrontation, the real consequence of the slap, was only moments away. Steven Seagal had made his stand, and now the world was watching as the stranger's fate began to unravel under the weight of presence, authority, and undeniable control. The crowd had gone completely silent. Phones hovered mid-air, capturing every heartbeat of the moment. Steven Seagal's calm authority had turned the tables. The stranger, who had moments ago strutted with arrogance, now felt the weight of every gaze on him. His confidence wavered, his smirk fading as he realized something he hadn't anticipated. The world was watching, and the crowd had collectively turned against him. Then it happened. A uniformed security officer, arriving just in time, stepped forward. His eyes widened as he took in the scene, then froze for a moment before speaking, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Sir, that's Steven Seagal." The words rippled through the crowd instantly. Gasps, whispers, and audible exclamations filled the air. People began pointing, some shouting in disbelief, others laughing nervously at the stranger's miscalculation. "Oh my God, he actually slapped Steven Seagal. You've got to be kidding me. Are you serious?" The stranger's face drained of color. His arrogance evaporated in an instant. The smirk was gone, replaced by panic and confusion. The crowd's energy had shifted completely. Where there had once been a tense standoff, now there was collective judgment, a wave of realization that the man they had thought they could intimidate was no ordinary person. Steven Seagal, still composed, observed the shift with his trademark calm. He didn't gloat. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't strike. He simply let the revelation do the work. His presence alone, combined with the crowd's recognition, made the stranger feel small, insignificant, and utterly exposed. Every person present, every viewer online, could feel the shift psychologically, emotionally, mentally. The stranger was trapped in a storm of attention he had never intended to invite. People began recording commentary in real time, narrating their astonishment for the growing online audience. "He slapped Steven Seagal." One whispered, "He's going to regret this forever." Comments and messages were already spreading online. Across multiple countries and cities, viewers were captivated, glued to the screen, wondering what would happen next. The stranger, now desperate, tried to speak, to apologize, to regain some semblance of control, but every word faltered. The crowd didn't let him off the hook. Some shouted at him, others laughed nervously. Even those who were watching from a distance could sense the full magnitude of his mistake. The mental trap was complete. Viewers were emotionally invested, cheering for justice, and feeling the sting of the stranger's embarrassment from afar. And Steven? He simply used the moment to teach a quiet lesson. Stepping slightly forward, he addressed the stranger, calm but firm. "Respect is earned, not demanded. Humility is stronger than arrogance, and actions like yours have consequences." The crowd erupted in applause. People cheered, some laughed, others whistled, all emotionally hooked by the power of restraint, combined with moral authority. The stranger sank slightly, realizing the gravity of his mistake. He had thought a slap would provoke fear, maybe humiliation, but instead, it had revealed him completely, while elevating Steven to a higher level of respect. Even the media cameras outside the restaurant captured every second. Clips were immediately trending online. Comments flooded in from around the world. "I'm watching from London. He didn't even fight back. New York here. That slap was his biggest mistake. Manila, Steven Seagal is untouchable." The energy was overwhelming. Everyone watching, both live and online, felt the lesson. Arrogance, in the face of calm authority, is doomed. The stranger's foolishness had created a viral moment, one that would haunt him forever. The crowd, emotionally and mentally captivated, had witnessed not just a confrontation, but a complete unraveling of a brash individual under the weight of presence, composure, and global recognition. Steven Seagal didn't have to raise a fist. He didn't have to shout. He let the revelation speak for itself. The stranger's humiliation was complete. The crowd was satisfied, and the world was watching in awe. The mental trap was set, and the story had reached its peak. The slap that was meant to shock had ended up exposing arrogance while highlighting restraint, dignity, and authority. And as the crowd cheered, Steven's calm eyes scanned the scene. He knew this moment would be remembered, shared, and analyzed endlessly. The stranger had learned a lesson he would never forget. The world had learned something too. Sometimes, true power is shown not through anger, but through calm, calculated presence. The slap that had shocked everyone outside Steven Seagal's restaurant was now more than just an incident. It had become a story that the world couldn't stop talking about. Clips of the confrontation went viral within minutes. Millions of people across cities and countries were watching, replaying every second, commenting, and sharing their disbelief. The stranger who had struck Seagal was now infamous, his arrogance fully exposed. Meanwhile, Steven Seagal's calm, composed reaction became the focus of admiration, discussion, and awe worldwide. News outlets picked up the footage. Headlines ranged from simple recounting of the event to sensationalized versions highlighting the stranger's mistake. Across social media, people praised Seagal not just for his martial arts legacy, but for the way he handled the situation. He hadn't lashed out. He hadn't retaliated. He had stood tall, confident, and dignified, letting presence, composure, and moral authority do all the work. The stranger faced immediate consequences. Security officials questioned him, the footage went viral across platforms, and public opinion overwhelmingly turned against him. It wasn't just embarrassment, it was a lesson in humility broadcast globally. People were mentally and emotionally hooked by the story. Everyone who watched could almost feel the sting of the slap and the weight of the lesson in restraint. For fans, the incident became a reminder of why Seagal wasn't just a movie star, he was a living legend. He had faced real battles in life and martial arts, and his response now showed a different kind of strength, mental mastery over chaos. Comments poured in from all over the world. "I'm watching from London, he didn't even fight back. Yet he completely owned the situation. New York here, that slap just ruined the guy's day. Manila." Steven Seagal showed what real power looks like. Even the stranger, now facing ridicule and backlash, couldn't escape the lesson. The global reaction mentally and emotionally trapped viewers, creating a story that lingered in their minds far longer than most viral clips. Every person watching was processing the same truth. Arrogance, against dignity and control, almost always leads to humiliation. Steven Seagal didn't need to gloat. His calm, authoritative response had already delivered the ultimate statement. The incident became an instant case study in restraint, presence, and the psychological power of standing firm in the face of provocation. Fans analyzed it, shared it, and debated it mentally, replaying the tension, the standoff, and the moment the stranger's confidence collapsed. And the story didn't end there. The clips were reshared, news cycles discussed it, and millions across social media platforms dissected the sequence. Every like, comment, and share further amplified the lesson. Strength isn't about retaliation. Strength is about presence, patience, and mental control. For the world watching, it was unforgettable. A single slap had spiraled into a global spectacle, exposing arrogance and elevating Seagal's reputation beyond the realm of movies. The stranger had underestimated the power of calm authority, and the audience witnessed the consequences in real time. Emotionally, mentally, and psychologically, the viewers were hooked, replaying the confrontation over and over. Finally, as the online wave of praise grew, the ultimate message became clear. Respect is earned through composure, not aggression. Steven Seagal had turned a shocking moment into a global lesson, one that millions would remember for years. If you believe real power comes from calm, not chaos, type respect in the comments. Share this story, and subscribe for more insane, mind-trapping stories that leave you shocked.